Isn't Markdown the coolest thing? Oh man, I love it. You can use it for all sorts of things. You know, your READMEs and GitHub. You've got like the syntax formatting and Slack and Discord using it. Rust, comment documentation and all that. It's just like permeated everything. It's such a great, brilliant idea. Whoever came up with that, or set of individuals that came up with that, you are awesome. It's such a cool thing. And wouldn't it just be sweet if you could just have a blog made of Markdown where you don't need a special interface to enter your data or anything like that? You've got your files version controlled because they're just simple flat files, so you can go back to any point, anytime you changed anything, roll back, look at how it was. Man, wouldn't that be cool if Gatsby supported such a thing? Well, picking up where we left off, we've got our data, and we had some Markdown, and we were about to turn that into some pages. Let's make another Markdown file, just so we've got a couple of them here. This one will be second page, and it has some gibberish. Beautiful. And actually, you know what? Let's take it to the next level here. Let's do some actual Markdown features. Let's say list item 1. Here is number 2. And a third. Okay. Let's do a couple different levels just so we can see it. H3 after H1. Gasp. Skip level. Okay. So let's go pop over to here. And yeah, we can continue off where we're looking at this adding Markdown pages. I just wanted to show you in case you want to follow along. This will be in the description. And follow the documentation that Gatsby has prepared. They're just going to add this gatsby-transformer-remark next. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So we actually want to go over to our terminal now, and we'll say yarn add gatsby-transformer-remark. So there's like source plugins, and that's to source your data. And there's transformer plugins, which is to transform said sourced data. And so this one in particular, remark, is a way of taking Markdown and transforming it. Okay, so we'll run develop here. I probably shouldn't have done that yet since I need to set my plugin. But go to the next one here. Now this is one of those ones where we shouldn't need to pass anything in at all. So we can just do the string version of it. Trailing comma, go. And that should be enough. We can go back to our terminal and see if it tells us that it needs to restart. In this case, it did somewhere along the lines. Let's see if I believe it. Can I reload? Yeah, looks like we do need to. Let's try it. Okay, let's reload GraphQL. Oh, look at that. So it was that easy. Just add the plugin, and it's there. So we're back in GraphiQL, obviously, and we can look at Markdown remark, and let's just like get the first entry. Well, let's see. What do you got? Well, you got a whole lot of stuff here. Let's look at the HTML, shall we? Oh, that's pretty cool. So you've got, it's just kind of like built the page out for you. Well, it hasn't kind of, it has. You also have an abstract syntax tree, in case you want to get real wild. You know, there's that for you. Anyone is into that. It builds an ID for each of the items. You know, there's these headings, which is kind of interesting. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, you gave me nothing. So I don't know what that does, actually. Oh, depth, 1 and 3. So, kind of weird that it doesn't have... What about the values? Yeah, okay. I wonder why the ID didn't work. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. You know, it detects headings. We've got our front matter still here, which is nothing. Should be nothing right now. It always comes along with this title. It's kind of weird. I'm not sure why it does that. But if you were to put title there, it would go there, which we should do, and we will do in just a moment. There's some pretty cool, like, table of contents. I don't think that that will have anything for us right now. But if we go to time to read, for example, this is pretty neat. You've got 1, which I'm assuming is a minute. I can't remember. And then paragraph, sentence, words. Okay. this is pretty cool. So telling you how many paragraphs, how many sentences, and how many words. I'm not going to go count it to confirm it. Sorry, but I trust in it. Okay, so let's move on to actually generating that stuff. So we have the data now, which is really cool. It's been sourced, it's been transformed, but now we want to get access to it. So now we have to actually start writing some queries, which is going to be interesting. Okay. So were we to go back over to here, we're not going to need this config anymore, but we're going to need to do something different here. So in the createPages API, it actually gives you a GraphQL function that you can use. We certainly can just keep these pages if we like. There's nothing wrong with that. You can create multiple sets of pages. And then what I'll do is I'll make a query here. We'll say, oh, I don't know what we're going to call this, Markdown, MD pages, why not? And then you can make a GraphQL call, and it's a function in this instance. And then you just pass it your query as a string. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do the standard, edges node thing here. And actually, I showed this on the last video, but I don't actually know why, after I was thinking about it, you need to do edges, because there is just this nodes thing here, where you could just pull off all the stuff. Well, let's do something simple right away. That's cool. It gives you a little excerpt. Yeah, I don't really understand that. I think it's just because edges has next and previous. So in the context, well, let's just show it. Why not? So if you go to HTML, let's say for this one, so we can see what each one is, and maybe we'll do like the file absolute path. You can also do like next here and be like, okay, well, what is that file absolute path? And then you can do previous and do the same thing. And when you query it, you're going to have, so your edges, which is your array, and then you're going to have an array of objects. So notice this is all under one object here. So you have the node, which is the thing that you're currently on. And then you have, after that, next and previous. So this one doesn't have a previous, as you can see, and this one doesn't have a next. So we have two pages. So I guess if you're going to, try to like paginate through or have like a next and previous button, that would be pretty useful. That's one thing you could do with that information. But if you don't need that, I'm not sure why you wouldn't just do nodes, but every time I see any guides or anything like that for Gatsby or docs, it always uses edges. So that's what we're going to do. As a side note, like there's some other stuff all on this, all markdown remark, like total count and all that. But that's a little out of the scope here. So we'll do the node. And really all we're going to need from this is the front matter. And then we're going to want to pass the slug to generate out these pages. So let's go and edit our markdown and say, okay, you need some front matter. And if you're not familiar with this, front matter is just a way to store some like variable information for each one. So just show you. You can do, okay, the title is first page. Description is, you guessed it. Wish I could type. And we're going to need the slug. That's the most important part here. So we'll say first markdown. Let's just call it that. And let's do that same thing. Go into this one. And we'll do this one will be second markdown. Second page. I'm not even going to bother changing that other one. Why waste your time? Okay, so now when we write this query, what we want to do, go back to our query builder, is take all markdown remark edges node, and we really, well, I guess we should reformat or reload. We just need slug. That's cool, isn't that? It's just right there. We just changed all our stuff. We don't want, are we on previous? I don't want previous. Sorry. I want node. Front matter, slug. Cool. So this is your query. So we're going to say, okay, let's take this. And as a side note, you don't actually need this part here for a single query in GraphQL. But if you are ever going to do multiple queries, like if I were to have two of these back to back, that I don't know why you would ever do this, but let's say we wanted like a title from this one. And this would be, if you try to run this, it's going to see two unnamed ones. So the synonymous operation must be the only defined operation. So you do need to have like whatever name you want here. First query, second query. This doesn't come up too often, but just so you know why. Cool. Pop back over here and let's paste this out. And I'm just gonna indent that a little bit. And then here what I want to do is I want to make this async. You could just do this with promises, but if we do this asynchronous, what's going to happen here is this query is going to take a little bit of time, and we want to wait for it. So we'll come back up here and say await this before we start moving on to the next thing. And for now, let's just console.log what we have. Okay. What we are going to do, though, after that is create page. So let's come back over here. And I'm going to guess that I need to rebuild for this one. Wait, what did I log? Yeah, MB pages. Oh, I was like, missed it. Data. So you can see that gives us back data, which is a common convention here. Your GraphQL requests come back with the data property. And then that has all Markdown remark on it, which then has edges, etc. So you can see it follows the structure pretty closely. So let's do that. Let's say, okay, well, let's take md pages dot data dot all markdown remark dot edges. I know it's crazy. And now we're at the array level. So we'll map it. And then in this map, it's going to take a function, of course. But what we'll do is we'll pull off node from that. And then we'll move on to, we might as well just copy paste this. Nothing special here. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. And now you have node. And what we're going to do is instead of page.slug here, we'll do node.frontMatter.slug. Because if you remember, you go back here, when we were making these queries, it is node front matter, and then slug is the thing that we're getting. I could have just showed you that here, huh? I'm an idiot. Yeah. That's that. So front matter slug. This resolve. Let's make a new template for this. We'll call it Markdown. And then the context will... We don't actually need to pass the individual values, and you're going to see why. It's pretty cool. So we'll say node.frontMatter, but we will want the slug to look up this individual entry. So you might think at first that it's more intuitive to just like query all of your data and individually, build the pages from that data, just passing it all through context. But the way that Gatsby normally recommends it, and I don't actually know why this is, but the way that they always do it is they query each one by ID. And I'm guessing that's so that you can just kind of like pick off individual attributes that you want for each page. But since you do it all in one template, yeah, I'm not sure why, but let's follow the convention. So we'll come over here to generic, copy. I'm going to paste that and rename this to Markdown. And then I might as well just do this and change that to Markdown. And we're not going to need page context anymore, but we are going to get data because we're about to make a GraphQL query. And we'll come back and fix this in a moment. So what's going to happen now is when we go to create these pages right here, it's going to use Markdown as the template to do it. So it'll automatically go and look up that file. And in this file, what you can do is you can grab, import GraphQL off of Gatsby, and then you probably want to do it right here, and you can do export const. Now you got to export this because it's kind of weird, but it's the way that Gatsby is going to pick this up for this page and inject it into here. So you can imagine whatever GraphQL query you write here. So we'll call this page, page query. It's going to be, actually, I think this one should be lowercase. It doesn't really matter, but I'll just stick with the norm. GraphQL. Yeah. Okay, so now we write our query. This query is going to be really interesting, and I'm going to reference the docs to show you this part. I know it's got to be here somewhere. Here we go. So what's interesting about this one is that you'll notice that you have this query and then you have a slug that's a string in their example. So what this is doing is it's saying, hey, the context that's going to be passed to me is going to pass me some variables, in which case we passed a slug. And so that is going to be the variable. You need to declare the type in GraphQL, and then you want to use that variable here. Okay, but let me show you how to just query build this yourself a little bit. So if we were to come back here and say, we're not going to query for all Markdown now, we're on the individual page. So we want to query, oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that it would like separate these two. That's pretty cool. Go away. So Markdown remark, we want to say, okay, what do we want for this? Well, we're eventually going to need the HTML, so I might as well grab that. But for now, what we really need is description, slug, and title. Now when we query this, it's just going to give us the first one. But we're going to take said query here. We're going to plop it here. And then what we'll do with that, you don't really have to nest that, is you could just make this kind of an anonymous query here and say, okay, the variable is going to be slug, just like we saw. That's a string. But then when we do markdown remark, you'll notice that it actually lets you, these purple ones that I'm finally getting back to, it will use those to filter your data or query by specific things. So in this instance, we want to say front matter slug, and I want that slug to be exactly equal to, and let's say I want it to be equal to, in this case, first dash markdown. Okay. Then when I run this query, it'll give me this one. So let's say we had a second dash markdown, and there you go. You get the second one. So that's what we're trying to do here, is bring this part over. So I might as well just copy paste this line just to show you. And then so that's going to replace here. But this individual part right here, we're going to want to get rid of that and put our variable that we have on each page. So, you know, if your head's spinning a little there, it's kind of weird the first time you do it, but you'll get used to it. When you come back to Gatsby Node, just remember that we're looping all of this data, and the whole point of this was to say, like, how many markdown pages do I have? And let me grab just the slug from that. I'm going to start building some pages using this template here, and we'll pass the slug to look it up as we build each page. So now we're at the page level. This is our template. This is how we want to spit out all our data, and we're going to make this query based on the variable that came to us, and then that comes all the way back around. It gets injected into the component, and now you have your data. Cool. So if we were to say const and pull off markdown remark, for example, from const this equals data, you know, we could do that in other ways just to kind of shorthand this a little bit. Now we have that markdown remark, and then let's start over here and say, okay, well, take markdown remark, and we want to delve into the front matter of that. And from the front matter, right here, we want the title. And then let's do that same thing here. But instead, we'll change that title to description, because we want a description here. And then obviously, the rest of your template can be whatever you like if you don't want it to just be markdown. We're going to dump the HTML in just a second, but let's test that this actually worked. So we got a bunch of log things here, and I don't like reading, so I'm just going to restart and type it wrong. Okay, so we've got a bug, and that's perfectly fine. Variable slug of required type string was not provided. Okay, so we're saying that here, this bang is saying that we need to have this for this query, so we're getting a nice error. That's pretty cool. This syntax all seems to be right. So what's probably wrong is in Gatsby Node, I have a typo here or something. So how we can troubleshoot this is say, what does each node look like? And if you have a hard time finding this, I just do some silly stuff like this. Come back down here. I shouldn't need to rerun it again. It should be printing it, but let's see. Okay, there it was, all the way up here. Yeah, we do have front matter, and we do have slug. Front matter. So as we're creating a page, context. Oh, haha, wrong name. What a noob. So yeah, change that back to slug here, and maybe things will magically work now. It looks like they did. It does say it needs to restart. This is your life with Gatsby. It is the great downside of static site generators, is having to rerun them over and over again. It is getting more streamlined, which is pretty cool. You know, they keep making improvements to it, but just so you know, that is kind of a pain. Okay, so let's check out our page. It looks like we're all good here. Let's reload this page. And you can see we have first markdown, second markdown. So if we go to first markdown, oh, that's our data from our page. Isn't that cool? And then second one, same thing. So yeah, these are the original generated ones just from some static data. And these are from our markdown now. Okay, so the last thing here is to actually dump the rest of the markdown. So that we were just using front matter from it just to show how to do that. But in our markdown template, what you can do is instead of this P here, we'll do a div, which is pretty common. And then we'll do dangerously set inner HTML. It's a scary one. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And then, since I can never remember the syntax because, you know, I just copy paste it every time. Oh yeah, underscore underscore HTML, and then we're going to get the HTML off of Markdown remark. Yes. So this one, notice that it's a double braces here. So you need to start JavaScript and then have an object. So yep, it takes HTML. Thank you for that hint. And then we're going to try and grab HTML. And HTML is just going to come straight from this, because if you notice we pulled off, well, let's do this. You pulled off Markdown remark, and under the scope of that, we have HTML and front matter. So I'll just do it this way, Markdown remark dot HTML. You could abstract it more, obviously, however you want to do it, it's fine. I'm not going to judge. Let's see if that works first. So we'll go to first page, check that out. So we've got our, this is the ones that we printed from the front matter. This is the actual Markdown. We've got an H3, we've got our little paragraph, and then we have a bullet list. It's really cool. So I think to close here, we should really briefly talk about dangerously set inner HTML, because that's pretty scary, right? This is a React thing, and that's because they want you to be very cautious when you are just taking any sort of HTML string and trying to render it to the page. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of vulnerabilities that come up from that situation if you don't know who is going to be using that data. In this case, Gatsby, when we're using this transformer plugin, has already done all of the, you know, markdown, sanitization, and all that, and we don't really have any way besides coming straight from Gatsby to render this out. So it's not a problem. It's not something you need to worry about. But normally in a React app, you might need to, because this might be running client side, and so you might be generating things from like user input or anything like that, and that's why this is a dangerous operation. You can read more about that if you want to know any more specifics, but just wanted to, you know, make sure that you're not mega spooked in this instance. It is the normal way to do it here. Okay, and now we have a blog that we can create just using markdown pages and dumping them. It looks terrible, of course. You know, that's up to you to start styling and make it as lovely as you like. But that is pretty cool, and I would say it's mostly simple. There's a little bit of boilerplate that goes on setting it up. You kind of get used to that. But once you set this up once for a template, then you're pretty good from that point on. And then you can use all of that cool markdown data that came from here, like the time to read and all that stuff, if you want to put that at the top of your articles and all sorts of sweet stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's pretty nice. And that's where I think we'll end this one.